Last week, I gave a sermon which I had given 2 weeks before in Buffalo, and I had referenced a cup that I had. I had forgotten to bring the cup, for those of you in Buffalo. I had forgotten to bring the cup. When I was speaking in Buffalo, I did have the cup. But I have it today, and I'm setting it here. This is making Hazel quite nervous, of course. The cup has, I call it my excuse cup. So I'm carrying this cup around all the time. It's clearly off center, as everybody can see, slanted, not as a cup ought to be. And it has the caption on the front, which is my excuse: nobody is perfect. And so I found out more about this cup. I didn't know where it came from. After last week's sermon, I talked about it in the sermon. I found out that the cup was given to Bryant 25 years ago by Wendy Jacobs. That was his explanation. I don't know if he actually calculated the 25 years or he just sort of guessed at that. But Wendy Jacobs gave that cup to him. Well, I appropriated it because it's far more appropriate for me than it is for Brian. Nobody's perfect. But an example of that this morning, Hazel came and asked me about clothes. Well, I long ago, because I am so imperfect, I have ceased to try and select my own clothes. It became a guessing game because Hazel said, this doesn't match with that, so I'd have to change. I was constantly having to change my clothes because I am not able to select things which match. So it's just a small example of some of my imperfections. So I appropriated this cup because I can always have it as an excuse, but in a weak attempt to blunt the obvious implications, I went back to what some people had said to me in the past: you're nobody. And so I didn't particularly like that at the time, from time to time people, you're nobody. Well, now I had this cup, and I could nickname myself Nobody. And the cup has the message on it: nobody's perfect. So I nicknamed myself Nobody. Problem solved. Accusations are blunted even though I have the excuse in my hand. Perfect little paradox. I use that as an introduction because Christ has a name which conveys meaning to us, an entirely different meaning than the meaning that I'm conveying with the cup, but he has a name which is probably the absolute opposite, and that name is I Am. So I'd like to talk today in this sermonette about the meaning of the name I Am. The name was revealed to Moses in the land of Midian when Moses was 80 years old. He left Egypt when he was 40 years old after he killed an Egyptian, and then he was in exile in Midian for another 40 years, 80 years old, and God appeared, it says Elohim, appeared to him in the burning bush and revealed this name to him. Kind of interesting because as the bush burned, it didn't get consumed. And you think about that in relationship to the word, I am. That bush continued to be, even though it was burning, it was not being consumed as a fuel. The verse of Scripture is found in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. God said unto Moses, Moses had been commissioned to go back to the Israelites and lead them out of captivity, and he was filled with a considerable amount of trepidation about that, didn't really want to do it. And so he said, well, at least tell me who it is that I can tell them has sent me. And this is the answer that it says Elohim. It was the one who became Christ. This is the answer that he gave to Moses at that time. God said to Moses, I am that I am. I mean, it's like, a pair of bookends. I am that I am. And he said, thus shall you say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And it's a name. It's a title. It's a name. And it's a name which conveys meaning, as many of the names in the Bible do. The word am is a short word, two-letter word, but what does it mean in this context? The word am in the English language, I think this is somewhat consistent with the Hebrew from which it is translated. It is a verb. It is a verb. We used to conjugate verbs in school. I don't know if anybody conjugates verbs anymore in school. But we had to conjugate verbs endlessly for Miss Patello, who was, in my eyes at the time, being 16 years old, was an old lady, old lady school teacher who was just who was punishing us by giving us all of these verbs to conjugate. And her favorite verb was the verb to be. To be. And it always seems kind of strange to me. The verb to be starts out with I am. Present tense. It is something that it expresses the tense of that verb. Present tense. I am. Right now, it is saying I am. It is always in the first person. It is always the person who is speaking. I am. And there are, of course, many different ways verbs are used in different languages. This particular verb in English is be, was, been. Be, was, been. That's the different forms of the verb. Be, was, been. Not that that's so important. I'll tell you, in the Estonian language, in the verbs that they conjugate, they have 16 different case endings for each verb. So it's no wonder the Russians find it kind of a very difficult language to speak and to learn. You might say, for example, in using this first person, present tense, I am tired of listening to this sermonette. But that expresses first person and present tense. The way you are feeling right now and your personal opinion in that way. Christ is using it in a little bit of a different way when he says this to Moses. It is strictly first person. I am that I am. Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. But what is some of the implications of am? Am what? He just says, I am that I am. Am what? I think in regard to this, as I was growing up, I used to read the funny papers, and Little Orphan Annie, I think it was just called Annie, but we all called it Little Orphan Annie, had this character that would appear in her life from time to time. Mr. Am was his name. And it was a reference to God appearing to her based on this particular verse of Scripture. The am. I am. I am that I am. But am what? It requires something to be understood as meaning something. I am that I am. And here I think it is just encompassing almost everything. To say that God is almost everything. I am that I am. I thought of 4 different things here that I thought we could put into this scripture. I am eternal. I am what? Number 1, eternal. That is, I have a past, I have a present, and I have a future. I have always existed. I am eternal. And interestingly enough, there's a big difference between the word eternal and immortal. You know, we think that we will be immortal at the resurrection. That is, from that time on we will live forever. But the Bible tells us in different places we're going to be eternal, which means past, present, and future. Well, Christ I am eternal. He has always existed. He was presently existing, and he will exist in the future. Second meaning that I thought am related to, Christ am the creator and the sustainer. He created the universe, and we're told that he sustains it. He continues to cause it to function. Talking to Carl before services, Mr. Marlowe, before services about kinetic energy. Well, kinetic energy is the energy of motion. And there is a law by which that energy operates. And that will be this. When we leave here today, it's going to operate in the same way that it did when we got here. And you have to respect it. Somebody is sustaining this universe in the way that it is operating. The third thing I thought about in this regard, Christ is perfect. Nobody's perfect, well, except for Christ. And even though I transformed my own name, chose my own name to sort of circumvent the meaning that I knew was really true, an attempt, and probably a failed attempt to be humorous. It says nobody's perfect. Well, Christ is and was, he am, you might say, perfect. He is the perfect one. The fourth thing that I thought about in this regard is Christ is our example. I am your example, he might say. I am that I am. And we could probably come up with any number of other meanings for what he is. I am what? Well, we could probably look for quite a few others. But I think those embody a lot of the things those 4 embody a lot of the things that we are looking at in his name. He's our example. Now, I need an excuse cup. I have to have it. This used to belong to Brian, but I stole it from him, proving that I'm not perfect. And I use it all the time. I carry it around. And so I have my excuse cup. I use it to feign perfection by choosing the name nobody. I selected this verse of Scripture for this sermonette because we read it here in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 14. But when we get to the Bible study, which we won't be doing today because too many people are missing, but when we get to John chapter 8, you will find there that Christ said to the Pharisees, I am. And he was referring to this verse of Scripture. And they really and they understood that. And they really took great offense to it. But I wanted to put this in your minds so that when we get to the Bible study, you'll already understand that. We are not perfect, even though I'm trying to kind of pretend in a humorous way that I am perfect. We're not. But we can have aspirations of becoming perfect. Christ set our example. I am the example. If you follow me, you can become perfect. And you may ultimately then be able to say, I am perfect after the resurrection. Not that I am saying in the least way that you can ever assume that title for yourself. That is a name and a title which belongs to Christ. But if you want to use the verb in the common sense of the word, as not as a name, you may say that you may say, I am perfect someday, in the common sense of the word, not in the sense of the title that it goes. In the meantime, I will continue to carry this cup around, and I'll know what it means that nobody is perfect except Christ is perfect. I am that I am. Tell the children of Israel that I am has sent you.